Right, so for question 13, applications of formulas, right? If we don't know the formula, we're kind of stuck. So the easiest formula, quote unquote, formula is perimeter, because you don't really need a formula for it. You just need to know that you're adding up all the side lengths. So in example A, good idea to like label the other sides just in case. Right, so I'm adding up each of these different side lengths. I'm adding up 2 and another 2, a 3.1 and another 3.1. Whoops, this is not playing nicely. There we go. Beautiful. Right, so our perimeter, if we're again writing out things like professionals, 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 1 plus 3 plus 1. So if I add up each of these values, I'm getting 4 plus 6.2. So I'm getting 10.2. And don't ever, ever, ever forget your units in geometry. God forbid. Right, so 10.2 yards. I'll do the areas in a second. So in this example here, I have an 8 kilometers, I have a 7 kilometers, and I have a 10 kilometers. So our perimeter is going to be just 7 plus 8 plus 10 kilometers. If we add those up, we're going to get 25 kilometers. Notice that that 5.6 doesn't affect our perimeter because it's not the outside of the shape, it's kind of inside. Spoilers, that's going to help us with our area. For this question, we have a parallelogram. Right, so parallelograms mean that this side length and its opposite side length are both the same. So both of these are going to be 15. And by that logic, if this is 11, then this side is also going to be 11. So if we want to find the perimeter, I don't know why it says A and C. All right, so let's pretend that's a P. We're not finding a circumference. So we would get 15 plus 15 plus 11 plus 11, right? That's going to be 30 and another 22. So that's going to be 52 yards. So now areas, we need some area formulas, right? So for A, we have a rectangle. And I would also recommend like writing out formulas, especially when they're new, you don't know them, right? So the area of a rectangle, and just good study habits, right? Literally write area rectangle area. Don't just write area because you're going to deal with more areas than just rectangles, right? Help your brain by remembering area of rectangle. If you can ever think about things in words instead of thinking about them as just letters, also will help your brain out. So the area of rectangle is length times width, right? So you'll probably see it very often as like length times width like that. Doesn't do a great job because these are just letters that are meaningless without words attached to them. So think about things in terms of the words. I'll get off my soapbox and I'll just plug in our values here. All right, so the length doesn't matter if we choose 2 or 3.1. As long as we choose one for length, the other is going to be the width. So 2 times 3.1 is going to be 6.2. Now, again, we want to know and keep our units. So in this case, it's going to be yards squared because we're working with areas. The reason, just in case you've never seen this before, this is 2 yards and this is 3.1 yards. Right, so 2 times 3.1, that's where the 6.2 comes from. If I have yards and I multiply by yards again, anything times itself is squared, right? So yards squared, yard times yard, yard squared. For a triangle, right? So I'll do what I said to do, right? An area of a triangle is equal to 1/2 base times the height. And many times also see again, it's like an A equals 1/2 BH. So for triangles, the important thing to note is that the base and the height are always going to be perpendicular to one another. They're always going to meet at a right angle. So this 10 is going to be our base. This 5.6 is going to be our height. Be careful, right? Because it kind of can seem pretty, common sense to use 7 and 8 because it's kind of like it's sitting on 7. It's kind of a height, right? So base and heights always have to be perpendicular. If the 7 and 8 don't make a right angle, they're not the base and the height. Right, so then once I have that, I'm going to just throw in what I know. I have a half of my base was, 10 kilometers. My height was 5.6 kilometers. So I'm just going to, do a little bit of division for multiplication. A half of 10 is 5. 5 times 5.6 is going to be 28. So we're going to get a 28 kilometers squared. And then trapezoids can be a little weird. Right, so trapezoids, the way that parallelograms, what am I talking about, trapezoids, right? I always remembered parallelograms like this, right? So if this was my rectangle, which had an area of base times height, if I kind of nailed it down at the bottom and just kind of like push the top of it, it would look something like this. It would look like a trapezoid. parallelogram. I don't know why I got trapezoids on the brain today. So the idea is that if you kind of just shift that rectangle over, you're not really changing the area. You have this and you kind of shift that, you can put the same amount of area in them. So for a parallelogram, not the trapezoid, you're gonna have the same formula. It's gonna be your base times your height. So area parallelogram equals base times height. Again, bases and heights will always be perpendicular, they'll always form a right angle. So there's a height, there's our base. So your area is just going to be 8 times 15, which is 120. My units are yards, so yard squared.